Well, there's another world-famous quilter who uses an APQS George for certain types of sit-down quilting.
And that's Ricky Timms, who recently appeared on our TV program, Love of Quilting. Let's watch a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun to have you here, Ricky.
Thank you.
Well, we have kind of a different machine, don't we?
This is a different machine. It's just recently available for quilters, but I'm sure that your audience looks at this and probably thinks of it as perhaps a long-arm quilting machine, which is, of course, a machine that you manipulate the machine, and a lot of quilters use that. But a lot of people like to work on a tabletop, and this is based on a long-arm machine, except it has been sit down and mounted into a cabinet. So today, it's still going to be free motion. I'm going to be moving the quilt, and the machine is going to stay stationary.
So it's essentially like quilting on your home sewing machine, but you have a lot larger work area.
That's the best advantage of this machine, is you've got a lot of area, but it is just strictly for machine quilting. Free motion machine quilting. The first exercise that I'm going to do is I'm going to do lowercase cursive E's.
We've all heard of those, haven't we?
Absolutely.
We've all written them.
Learned how to do those in grade school. So I'm just going to start by stitching. And I want these to be about 2 inches tall. One of the tendencies that I see students doing in class is they'll go fast and then slow. Fast and then slow. And you can see immediately, as soon as I did that, how the stitches became uneven. Now I'm going to stitch over because I've got another letter that I'm going to do that is a little bit more difficult. Just move over. And this is the lowercase cursive C. A lowercase c. And so I'm going to let this go over, and now I have to backtrack on top to do this. Now, anyone that has done machine quilted feathers will know that in most cases you go back over some stitching.
So this is great practice.
This is great practice for doing that kind of stitching.
Well, I see what you're saying is that rather than starting to learn to machine quilt by doing a shape that you've never done before, do a shape that you have done before.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to move on with another little exercise that I really like. I call this ribbon candy. You remember the Christmas candies that twist back on themselves? Now, it's a little bit more complicated than the previous two, but that's what we're doing. We're growing, all right, with our exercises. And on this particular exercise, it's sort of like driving over, making a loop, and coming back and touching the previous one. It's not quite like a figure eight, but it feels a little bit like a figure eight.
Looks fun.
Actually, it's a pretty quilting design. You could do this up a border.
Oh, it'd be great in a border.
Yeah. All right, so this is Christmas candy. And notice, I mean, you got to go kind of halfway up and back over.
And you have a light touch on your fabric, too.
Yeah, and notice my hands are just starting to get too far away.
So you stop?
I stop, absolutely stop. And I stopped right where that stitch is going to come down and touch this other one, because that's a better hiding spot.
Forgiving spot.
Yeah, it's not way outside on a loop. So stop in a spot like that and then move your hands before.
That's a great tip.
And then continue on from there.
The simplest things sometimes help us so much.
Yeah. Now, the reason I like this ribbon candy is because a lot of quilters still have trouble with doing stipple quilting. I mean, they get lost in the meander. Well, this particular exercise takes them on that journey of doing what I call peninsulas and coves. So that as you're creating a peninsula, but then you're making a cove. And it doesn't have to just keep going, you know, side to side. It can go up and down and so forth, and always twisting and winding. And so this is the predecessor for opening that up and starting to do stipple type quilting. It doesn't go back and touch itself. And you know what? I always have quilters ask, oh, well, stipple quilting is not ever, ever supposed to cross over itself. Well, you know, on maybe something this big, it's not supposed to, but that word supposed to bothers me anyway, because it means there's a rule. And you know me, I'm very anti-rules when it comes to quilting. So if you accidentally, stitch over, is that is that going to be really the end of the world?
The quilt police are not going to arrest you.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I've found if I make one mistake, I'm better off to make that mistake again.
Which is easy
so
to
that
do.
it looks like I plan to do it. Well, would you quilt a feather design for us?
Absolutely. I want to do a free motion feather for you. I'm going to come over and I'm going to start this feather up at the tip of the feather. I'm going to do a feather and I'm going to come down. A little curvy feather would be all right. And then begin stitching. Now, of course, remember, it's easy to accidentally miss going over that line. If I were using a more matching thread, you wouldn't notice that as easily, but we're using a bright yellow thread here today so that the quilters can easily see the stitches on the television. Now I've worked my way back down and I'm coming up on the other side. I find that building a feather is much easier if you do it from the bottom to the top. Also, I don't think that every plume has to be the same size. As a matter of fact, you know, I just did a small one and then a little larger one. Sort of gives it a more organic feel, looks a little more fun, and it looks less mathematically planned.
Well,
so,
right. And if you're trying to make them all the same, then people might notice when they weren't. But if you intentionally make them different,
it's fine. It looks beautiful in the quilt, and I have a lot of fun doing these. Now that was improvisational. That was not marked, and you and I both know that marking a quilt is one of the most stressful, challenging parts of it. So anytime you don't have to mark the quilt, and you can imagine with a feather like this, if all you marked was like the spine on a border, and then just came back and just free motioned your loops, it would really look beautiful.
Well, marking's stressful, but taking the marks out can be even more stressful.
those are great ways to practice. So we hope everybody's going to get their sandwich out and practice free motion quilting with these very simple step-by-step processes.
Well, that was Ricky Timms. He can do some truly amazing things with his George machine.